Hello and welcome to Hanratty on Karate. I hope you all enjoyed the previous interviews with Sensei Edmund Otis. Sensei Edmund Otis is an 8th Dan, and we often chat, probably at least once a month, on Messenger or FaceTime or something like that. It's always interesting to exchange ideas with people who've been around, as long as he has, and as long as I have. And there's a few people in the world that have been around many years, 50 plus years. Malcolm Dorfman, Pat McCarthy, lots of people. We're kind of in a little circle. What I found, doesn't matter what style you are. I mean, mostly I know Shotokan people, but it doesn't matter what style you are. You always have admiration for the people who have been around this long and gone through everything the way we've gone through it. And even if we've not the same style, like I have a great admiration for Alfie Lewis, Liverpool fighter, freestyle fighter, trained in Kung Fu fighting. First seen Alfie in early 70s at one of Billy Higgins' tournaments. He was amazing, extremely flexible, fast, and a really smart fighter. He's a really philosophical guy, really easygoing, and still trains like crazy. Now he's in his 50s or 60s, I think. But anyway, what got me thinking about these older, or more experienced, I should say, not all older. I mean, a lot of us are old. But there's some younger guys around, younger than me anyway, who've got in 40-odd years of training. Matt Price, Richard Amos, all these guys. Kevin Warner, another guy from California. Really good guy, good karate. So I was thinking about a phrase I heard maybe 20-odd years ago called Shuhari. Shuhari is a Japanese phrase. It's basically a model martial art concept, and it describes the stages of learning that you go through to achieve mastery. Now, Shu, the first stage, is to learn, and you learn exactly as you're told, and you do it exactly as you're shown. And so some people might say, oh, you're doing that wrong, but if that's the way you're shown, then that's the correct way. Don't take anybody's word for it. If you're happy with your instructor, he's got a reasonable lineage and reasonable background and education in the arts, then what he's teaching you should be what he believes is the right way. So, hopefully it is. So you try to learn it the right way, exactly as he's teaching you. The second stage refers to detaching yourself from that learning. In other words, forming your own version of it, but not exactly detached. We can say detached, but I think you just start to branch out and you use the underlying principles and basics and theory that you've learned from your original instructor. You start to focus those factors into your basic practice and your learnings, and you started to be integrated into what you do, but how you're doing them is probably not the same way. As I've mentioned many times before, we all do our own version of karate. I don't care who you are or how close you follow the master or the organization. You can blindly follow them and go, oh, this should be Gedan or this should be Jodan. It doesn't really matter. We all do our own version of it. Chances are you're never going to have to prove it that yours works. The only person who's going to know whether it works or not is you and the guy you're in confrontation with. Very often there's no witnesses to say, oh yeah, he did this and it absolutely worked. You can say, oh, well, it worked in the ring in competition, but competition by nature has to be rule-bound. So, even though these guys will say, oh, we use Hikin-Izatsu, or we're a full-contact dojo, or we're absolutely taught to kill with one blow, it's a load of tripe. If you're using Hikin-Izatsu and you're taught to kill with one blow, you're going to soon have an empty dojo, all right? Or you're going to find yourself in serious trouble. There's accidental fatalities in every sport, including karate. I've seen it. And that's what they are. Generally, they're accidental. The most common one is a person dying from a punch. And it's usually a punch to the side of the neck that ruptures one of the major arteries or veins there. Now, as you have the carotid, the jugular, and the vagus nerve all in one tiny little triangle just about 2 fingers below your ear. If you ever get smacked there, you're going to know about it straight away. Usually it's a hand edge shoot-out kind of strike, or with a closed fist, you try to catch them with the knuckle just above the wrist in that area. When you're using maybe kakiwaki or something like this, like cross-hand block and strike, works very well. You've seen people just drop to the floor, even accidentally. So generally when you get a single blow fatality, that's usually where they've been hit. And generally the guy who's doing it doesn't know how to hit, or probably isn't even involved in martial arts. If you're doing that deliberately, you better know that that's the place where you can kill somebody. I'm not saying there aren't any other target points or points on the anatomy that can be fatal. There might be. I don't know. I haven't really been into it that much. Generally, I keep my targets to a broad range that I can access or strike when adrenaline hits. And if you're in a confrontation, believe me, adrenaline will hit. You're not going to be able to use all your fancy little fine movements or fine range of motions. It just goes out the window. Everything comes down to very broad brush strokes and major impacts. So fine targeting is not so much a thing that happens when you're full of adrenaline and when you're on the go. But anyway, to get back to Shuhari, as we say, the Shu part is the starting phase, and you follow the teaching of your master. You don't always understand the theory behind it, and in many cases, a lot of the masters don't know the theory behind what they're teaching, especially with modern kata. They teach it purely for sport or for physical exercise. You don't often see a person teaching kata from the application first and then teaching the form later, which is what I try to do personally. I try to show people some 2-person drills, and then I'll say, and you'll see something very similar in this kata, or it's even exactly the same as in the kata if you're lucky enough to find an application that works exactly the same as the kata, but generally starts off as a 2-person drill. Hopefully it can become more or less automatic so that it's one of your go-to things if you do get into a confrontation. But if it doesn't matter. You have a whole toolbox, hopefully, that you can pick from. As I've mentioned before, I got into a lot of street fights before I took up karate. What karate did for me was really broadened my technique base, so to speak. Also gave me a lot more confidence. I didn't get the adrenaline dump as quick as I used to prior to starting training. But I had boxed previously to taking up karate, so maybe that got me a little bit ahead. Anyway, getting back to Shuhari, which is a really interesting concept. And if you take it at face value, Shu is learning, and you learn from your master. Ha is the second phase, where you start to branch out. Underlying principles and theories are coming in, to what you're doing, but you're doing them your way. And Ri is where you kind of transcend. So you're not learning from others. You're learning from yourself, basically. You're changing sometimes what you do, but more or less what you do in it. How you're doing it. You have to. Your body starts to break down, especially when you've been doing this for 50-odd years, like I have and most senior masters have. If you've been doing that this long, you're going to start to make some really big changes into how you do it and some variations on the techniques. They'll still work for you. They may not work as fast. You're not as flexible. Your speed isn't there. Maybe your timing's gone off a little bit. I tend to find that my timing doesn't go that quick. And if you're training regularly, like I do, 2-3 times a week now, I've cut it down to 2 or 3 times a week. It used to be 6. But that's pretty regular training, even so. 2-3 times a week, it's probably more than some of my students do. You're going to find your timing stays as long as you're working with partners. People who don't have timing tend to do just drills up and down the floor or just kata. And when it comes to using it in a confrontation, they have no concept of timing. There's so many variables involved in partner drills and one-on-one confrontations and fights, if you like, that aren't contained within kata or basics. In other words, they're not there in the kion or the kata. And, those variables you can list. Timing is one of them. Distance is another, all right? And the psychological aspect of just facing somebody is way different. So besides timing and distance, you also have to consider targets. And I mentioned before that there's some targets that you really want to have a good look at. If your object is to put the guy down on the floor, which he should be, then go for the target, go for the technique and the target that you aim it for to do the most damage. Otherwise, you might not get out of there, and he might. And that's not the idea about it at all. That's not self-defense, that's stupidity. And I think I've mentioned before that if you have to think about the consequences of what you're going to do, then you're not going to do it. Because you can either think about the consequences or you can do it. You can't do both, all right? One of my old buddies and a guy I trained a lot with, Terry O'Neill, he used to say that all the time. And Terry worked doors, had a lot of confrontations, and he knew how to use it. Terry was one of these guys that could do the business. If you haven't heard of him, look him up. But it's worth it. And he's also a really nice guy. So if you're going to do all this, one thing you have to do is have the spirit to do it or the heart to do it. And when you're pushing ahead, you may not realize the stages that you're going through. You're going to start off, of course, learning, and you realize you're learning. After you get to Shodan, the learning gets more intense, all right? But at that time, you're slowly starting to go into the Ha stage, Shuhari. So you're going into the second stage where you kind of detach, and you find, I would say between Nidan and Sandan is where you start to move and work what you've learned and put it into, something that you can use. The underlying principles are still there, but you're making it more your own, all right? It's maybe you change the timing a little bit on a kata, maybe you double up on your combinations, or you have a combination that works well for you. So you're taking what you've learned and you're putting it into practice for yourself in a different way. And that's what you're supposed to be doing. So you're going to get some instructors, I've seen, they won't let the students do anything different than what they taught them. That's ridiculous. You're not going to make any progress. Karate, like everything else, is all about innovation and progression. And it has to progress. It has to be innovative. It can't be a static art. It's just not going to make it. It's just not going to work. It's entirely the wrong way to use it. So anyway, they move on from Ha to Ri, where you absolutely start working the stuff and transcending it. You kind of add into it, if you like. You figured out the basics. You know how to make kime instantly and switch off and move to another technique. You can put power into a technique, or you can put softness into a technique, or you can combine them. You start integrating maybe joint manipulations and throws into more of your impact techniques. When you first start, I know most people only learn impact techniques, whether it's blocking or striking or kicking. They're nearly all impact techniques. So you start to work those techniques in with other techniques that you kind of either developed for yourself or been shown or adapted or adopted. But adapting and adoption are different things. But basically, if you adopt something, you've seen something that you admire, and you should always be looking for something like that. And then you adapt it to how you can use it, because you're not going to be able to use it exactly the same thing as the other guy. You may not have the range of motion or the flexibility. But anyway, I just wanted to have a little chat about Shuhari and what the philosophy is behind it. And it can be used in life, of course. Whether you know or don't know what you're going through, you are. Generally, you're using Shuhari in every stage of your life. You're never going to master, of course, but you can make progress towards it, and you should. All right? So anyway, little thing for you to think about. And as always, if you have any comments or questions or anything to add, I'm always willing to learn. I'm still learning. And almost 80 and 50-odd years of training, still learning. And never will stop. So take care. Talk to you again.